I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. I recognize the senator from Iowa.
Tomorrow, January 9th, is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. 365 days a year, but especially tomorrow, we offer our gratitude to our country's men and women. When you meet one of them, you should say, thank you for your work. Thank you for keeping the peace. With President Trump's support, law enforcement nationwide is making America safer. This year, violent crime is down 12%, and murders across our major cities are down 20%. Record amounts of dangerous drugs like fentanyl, meth, cocaine, and heroin have been seized and thankfully are off our streets due to the hard work of law enforcement, very courageous work. I'm proud to back the Blue, and I'm also grateful for their work to maintain the peace. As chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee this year, I've continued my work to support law enforcement in Iowa, but also nationwide. In that role, I worked with Senate Republicans and the White House as part of the Working Families Tax Cut Law signed by the President on July the 4th, securing historic support for the Burn, JAG, and COPS program for local police, as well as efforts to combat drug trafficking. Additionally, 4 bipartisan bills the Judiciary Committee passed during Police Week in May became law with the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act. These new laws will expand access to federal support for law enforcement and their families and help state and local law enforcement combat online child exploitation. The National Defense Authorization Act also expanded counter-drone authorities for state and local law enforcement agencies using language that was based on legislation that I worked in a bipartisan way with the senior senator from Michigan. We should all look forward, but I want you to know that I look forward to working further with my colleagues this year to support police in a bipartisan way, and we're very fortunate that this type of legislation is mostly bipartisan in the Congress. To all those who have selflessly answered the call to keep our communities safe, I say thank you. May God bless you, and may God protect you as you go about your work of protecting the American people. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
I recognize the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the start of this week, I said that the Senate would be focusing on government funding this month. We have a January 30 deadline to get the job done and avoid another government shutdown. We've already passed one package of 3 appropriations bills that was signed into law in November, and now we need to finish our work. Later today, the House is expected to consider another package of 3 bills: commerce, justice, and science, energy and water development, and interior and environment appropriations. These 3 bills were crafted with bipartisan input from both the House and the Senate. The Trump administration supports this package, and I expect we'll see robust bipartisan support for these bills in today's House vote. Mr. President, this 3-bill package advances some important priorities. It funds programs that support law enforcement and promote public safety in communities across America. It invests in critical infrastructure projects. And it supports efforts to unleash American energy to provide a reliable and affordable energy supply to the American people. And Mr. President, there's one more thing about this package that's significant. It spends less money than a continuing resolution. That's right. This bill spends less taxpayer money than if we passed another CR or continuing resolution to fund these agencies. And that's not an accident. That's what we can accomplish when we make appropriations a priority, when we put in the work, make tough choices, and put it up for a vote. Mr. President, appropriations is one of our core responsibilities, but it hasn't always been treated like the priority that it is. In too many cases in the past, massive omnibus bills were being written behind closed doors. That is not how I want to do things. When I became Majority Leader, I made it clear that I wanted appropriations to get the attention that it deserves. And we've made some solid progress on that front in this Congress. We've considered appropriations bills through regular order and passed 3 Senate appropriations bills before the August work period, something that hadn't been done going back to 2018. We should, Mr. President, be considering bills through regular order, a process that allows all senators an opportunity to make their voice and the voices of their constituents heard. It's not just a better process, it creates a better product, too. Mr. President, when we receive this next package from the House, there's no reason that we can't take it up and pass it quickly here in the Senate. As I said, this bill was written with input from both parties and from both the House and the Senate. It has the backing of the Trump administration. It advances a number of important priorities, and it actually spends less than if we just extended Biden-era spending levels for these same agencies. And once we finish this package, we have more work to do. Appropriations are working to finish the remaining bills for fiscal year 2026. One of those is the defense appropriations bill, which is an especially important priority, to ensure that our military has the funding and certainty it needs to maintain and modernize its capabilities, support Americans serving in uniform, and protect our national security. Mr. President, we don't have time to waste, and it will require cooperation to ensure that we can keep making progress as the end of the month approaches. Because I want to be clear that January 30 means January 30. We can't afford another extension. And as soon as we finish, work will begin on the next appropriation cycle, starting with the President's budget request for fiscal year 2027. Mr. President, we've done a lot of good work on appropriations this past year, I should say. And I want to thank our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, especially Chair Collins, for their hard work throughout the year. This work isn't easy, but it's important, and it's a responsibility we need to take seriously. And I know they all do. So let's get fiscal year 2026 funding done and keep up the progress as we begin the process for fiscal year 2027. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
recognize the senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask for the calling of the quorum to be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, for 4 months, my Democratic colleagues and I have come to the floor to warn against President Trump's military operations in South and Central America. We've pointed out that his boat strike campaign was strategically incoherent, legally questionable, and ultimately not about narco trafficking at all. We have argued that the administration's shifting legal justifications, refusal to give Congress straight answers, and in particular, the failure of the Department of Defense to provide information to Congress which is required by law. All of these things, together with a massive military buildup, pointed towards something larger than narco trafficking. Indeed, we warned that these actions were always directed at the government and economy of Venezuela. That campaign has now culminated in a military raid on Caracas, the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and President Trump's extraordinary declaration that the United States will run Venezuela and seize control of its oil reserves. Let me be very clear about something at the outset. Nicolas Maduro is a brutal dictator who has destroyed Venezuela's economy, crushed democratic opposition, and fostered widespread corruption. He will not be missed. But this operation was not designed to restore peace in Venezuela or protect America from the ravages of drugs. Indeed, Mr. President, this operation is not about democracy. It is not about the suffering of the Venezuelan people. It is not even about narco trafficking, despite the administration's killing more than 100 people in its strikes on alleged drug boats. In the president's own words, this campaign is simply about seizing Venezuela's oil and profiting from it. The people of Venezuela have suffered extraordinary hardship under the Maduro regime. They have voted in multiple elections for new leadership and have been denied their choice through fraud and repression. After everything they have endured, the people of Venezuela deserve to choose what happens next in their country. They do not deserve to have their future dictated by President Trump, Secretary Rubio, or anyone else in Washington. Yet, that is precisely what this administration plans to do. The plan presented by the White House is to simply force the remnants of the Maduro regime to grant the United States exclusive access to Venezuelan oil or face the consequences of a blockade. That's it. That's the plan. Not in the plan, positive change for the people of Venezuela. There is no framework for elections or democratic transition. No serious assessment of the rival political factions inside Venezuela. Factions that have been waiting for precisely this moment to seize power. And I've seen no contingency plan for what happens when China, Russia, Iran, or Cuba, nations with deep economic interests in Venezuela, decide to block or back proxy groups in a country we have just destabilized. Nor have I heard any proposal for the next steps for countering narco trafficking. The administration's goals are aspirational at best, and aspirations are not enough when the stakes involve war and the future of millions of people. Mr. President, one of the first lessons I learned as an Army officer is that hope is not a plan. Over my career, both in uniform and in the Congress, I have seen the United States hope that its military interventions abroad would succeed. I have seen regime changes, nation-building efforts, and elaborate reconstruction schemes launched with confident predictions of success only to collapse when encountered with the reality on the ground. And the reality is this: when we rely on the United States military as our primary tool of foreign engagement, we generally set ourselves up for failure. We have persistently misunderstood and misjudged the cultures, histories, and politics of the nations in which we have intervened, because we assume military might is enough. We imagine outcomes that align with our military and economic objectives, but are surprised when those outcomes fail. We consistently fail to plan for the day after. Unless the Trump administration gets serious, Venezuela will be no exception. This isn't about our military capabilities. We have the most formidable fighting force the world has ever seen. And I am proud and frankly not surprised that all elements of our military work together to successfully execute such a dangerous and difficult mission in Caracas. The skill, professionalism, and courage are beyond question of these men and women. But military capability is not the same as strategic wisdom. The ability to achieve tactical objectives does not guarantee beneficial long-term outcomes. And executing a successful raid does not constitute a plan for governing a nation of 28 million people. Congress exists to provide oversight and scrutiny of the executive branch, not to cheer from the sidelines. I commend our servicemen for their performance last weekend, but I am deeply concerned by the Trump administration's lack of serious planning for the next phase. That is why this war powers resolution is necessary. The Constitution vests the power to authorize war in Congress, not the president. President Trump has claimed this was just a law enforcement mission, and that's absurd. No matter how he describes it, the president waged war on a foreign nation without authorization, without notification to Congress, and without any explanation to the American people about what this operation will cost or what success will look like. This is a profound constitutional failure, and it must be corrected. Mr. President, I hope I'm wrong about these dangers ahead. I hope this administration is right and the transition in Venezuela proceeds smoothly. I hope the Venezuelan people embrace this outcome and see their lives improve quickly. I hope that violent factions in Venezuela choose peace over conflict. I hope the economic recovery for the people of Venezuela justifies this enormous gamble. But as I said before, hope is not enough. And history suggests we should prepare for a far more difficult reality. The question before us is whether Congress will fulfill its constitutional duty or whether we will abdicate our responsibility and allow this president to commit American military resources, credibility, and potentially American lives to an open-ended entanglement without authorization or accountability. And I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from California.
Mr. President, for months, the Trump administration claimed that its campaign of blowing up boats in the Caribbean was about stopping drugs like deadly fentanyl coming to the United States. Never mind that fentanyl doesn't really come from Venezuela. It comes from precursors made in China and is predominantly smuggled in through Mexico. Never mind that there are well-established, well-practiced operations for interdicting drugs and apprehending alleged drug traffickers, not killing them. Never mind that we don't even have clarity on what was on these boats or who was on these boats and where they were headed. No, even as the U.S. military amassed unprecedented military firepower off the coast of Caracas, that included multiple warships, thousands of troops, and the largest aircraft carrier ever put to sea, the administration still claimed this was about drug boats. You heard the administration say that time and time again to the public and to Congress. Until last weekend, when the objective became clear. This was about Venezuela's oil, and if we could have that, we would leave the drug-running regime in place, albeit with its number 2 corrupt leader instead of its number 1, Nicolas Maduro. The rightful leadership of Venezuela, Maria Corina Machado and her election surrogate Edmundo Gonzalez, the ones who won the last election there, would have no place, no role in the new government, because this was no more about democracy than it was about drugs. It was about oil. Just yesterday, the Secretary of Energy said that the United States intended to maintain significant control over Venezuela's oil industry, including by overseeing the sale of the country's production indefinitely. Indefinitely. And Donald Trump has promised to use the revenue from these oil sales to create a fund that he would control. He's literally meeting with oil executives on Friday to try to divide up the spoils of this military campaign. Now, some of my colleagues may believe that using the U.S. military to depose Nicolas Maduro and seize Venezuela's oil is well worth the risk to our troops and the danger of becoming mired down in that country. I disagree, but if that was the case, let them seek an authorization from Congress to do so. We have so many urgent problems that need addressing here at home. With life barely affordable for millions of Americans and the cost of living rising, with people struggling to cover the rent, with families barely able to afford the cost of groceries, to say nothing of the skyrocketing healthcare costs. But now, instead of putting Americans first, we are stepping into a foreign nation and promising to run it for the foreseeable future. An administration that had promised to end foreign wars has begun a new one. A president who had decried the use of force for regime change or to engage in nation building has just committed our country to both. No doubt Russia and China see opportunity in this American about-face. Russia to indict Ukrainian leaders and to seize them, and China to do the same in Taiwan. We are not only at risk of reestablishing the idea that might makes right and military conquest is acceptable in your sphere of influence, but the very real prospect of destabilizing a world order post-World War II that has made us safer and more prosperous. Now, when it comes to Congress's role in checking this president, in asserting its war powers given to us by our founders and the framers of our Constitution, if we do not assert this power, we will lose it, and not just to constrain this president, but any president, and for all time. The American people have said clearly and repeatedly they do not want us dragged into new foreign wars, especially wars of our own making. And we have the power to make good on that instruction. We are a co-equal branch of government and the only branch endowed with the power of the purse and the power to declare war or to refuse to do so. But if we do not assert these powers, if we don't stand up not just for our branch of government, but for the American people, there is no telling and no stopping what comes next. Because the administration has made it clear that Venezuela is the opening salvo. Will it be Cuba next, or Colombia, or Mexico, or Greenland, for crying out loud? This is the moment where we need to stand up and exercise our powers as part of the government that is closest to the people, to make it clear that no president can commit our military forces absent an attack on our country or imminent threat of invasion without the approval of Congress, and certainly not to help industry chase new profits or revenue in oil or minerals around the globe. We have a duty to our constituents, to our Constitution, and to posterity. Let us uphold it. Vote yes on the resolution, and with that, Mr. President, I yield back.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
recognize the senator from Idaho.
Close. Are we in a quorum call? We are in a quorum call. Ask quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, fellow senators, we're about to vote on a war powers resolution, which is becoming common around here and way too common, as a matter of fact. But I think the first thing we ought to talk about is what we're actually doing here from a 30,000-foot standpoint as far as what the resolution actually says. As usual, there's a lot of setup in here, but there's 2.5 lines that says what we're trying to do here. Not we, what the other side is trying to do here. And it says, Congress hereby directs the President to terminate the use of the United States Armed Forces for hostilities within or against Venezuela. Let me say that again. We're directing the President to terminate the use of armed forces for hostilities within or against Venezuela. There isn't anybody that has any information that the President is using armed forces against Venezuela. He did for about 47 minutes this last weekend, but he is not in the process of doing this. And the resolution says that he should stop it. He's not doing it. Now, if the resolution were drawn to say, President, you can't do this anymore, that would actually have some effect, or attempt to have some effect. It would be unconstitutional, unenforceable, but to tell him to not do something or to stop doing something he's not doing is nonsense. The effect of this is to slap the President of the United States in the face. That is the only effect that this vote can have. It can have no practical effect because it's trying to stop something that isn't going on. So, we are again here considering this war powers resolution to remove the troops from a foreign country where they do not exist. The War Powers Act was created as a way to address the continuing deployment of U.S. forces into hostilities or in hostilities. There is no continuing deployment of U.S. forces in hostilities. The War Powers Act was never designed to remove the President's Article II right to defend the United States, its interests, or its citizens, and nor indeed could the War Powers Act do that, because the Constitution absolutely directs the President of the United States to use the military might of the United States to protect it. Indeed, the constitutional power is given to the President. We cannot change that. It is the power that he has. This vote and similar votes before it are an abuse of the War Powers Act. There are no U.S. military forces in Venezuela. The United States conducted a limited operation that removed an indicted narco-terrorist, Nicolas Maduro, from Venezuela and brought him to the United States to face justice for his crimes. Now, was this a good thing to do? Well, of course it was a good thing to do, and indeed, Democrats themselves have said that it was a good thing to do. I want to read from 3 different Democrats who've told us that this was a good thing to do. I'm not going to name them. They can step up and take credit if they want to. But these are 3 different Democrats. The first one said, obviously, we know Maduro and his cronies do not want to go quietly into the night, but the United States needs to work with its partners and allies in the region to ratchet up pressure. This was a senator on August 2nd, 2024. The same senator said, after Maduro was removed, it is an illegal act of war to replace Maduro. Another senator said, and this was back in 2019, if Trump cared about consistency, he would make the realist case for intervention in Venezuela. Getting rid of Maduro is good for the United States. This senator called for intervention in Venezuela. You know what he says now, after the invasion? The invasion of Venezuela was nothing to do with American security. Venezuela is not a security threat to the U.S. That's what he says today. Now, one of my favorites, this senator said, and this was on February 5th, 2020, and the president brags about his Venezuela policy. Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began. Well, the president changed that. He removed Maduro. You know what that same senator says today? This is reckless. And the American people are just this morning in fear of what's going to happen here. That was January 4th, 2026. This is the height of hypocrisy. The purpose of this resolution is to slap the president in the face. It will do nothing that it purports to do because it can't stop something that isn't going on right now. In addition, the president's actions in Venezuela are consistent with other presidents' efforts to protect the American people from threats in our own backyard. President George H.W. Bush authorized limited military operations to arrest Panama's Manuel Noriega and bring him to the United States to stand trial for drug-related charges, just as President Trump's done with Maduro. In that case, President Bush deployed more than 9,000 troops, and they fought for 2 weeks on the ground in Panama before they got their hands on Noriega. At that time, both Republican and Democrat leaders of the Senate praised this move. Compare that to what happened here. There were only about 200 troops involved, and they were engaged for 47 minutes. And yet, all of a sudden, this is a horrendous problem. Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate that. When you're in the business of flooding drugs into the United States, drugs that kill our children and hurt our country and destabilize our hemisphere in violation of U.S. law, and when you invite in Russia, China, and Iran to set up shop right in our backyard and do the things that they're doing, there's going to be a price to pay. Maduro is paying that price today. But unlike the former president, President Trump demonstrated he is a man of action. He was decisive and did what he promised the American people he would do, and that is to keep them safe. Now Democrats are reversing their position on Maduro's removal to criticize the president. The president's decision was the right call. Let's acknowledge that fact. Let's celebrate that fact. Let's resolve that the president of the United States is to be commended for what he did. My fellow senators, vote no on this resolution. This is nothing more than a slap in the face of the President of the United States. It cannot accomplish something that does not exist. I yield the floor.
I recognize the Democrat leader.
Mr. President, first I want to thank Senators Kaine for his great leadership on this issue, Senator Schiff, Senator Paul, for working with me on this resolution. If there was ever a moment for the Senate to find its voice, it is now. The Senate must act to stop Donald Trump's folly. Today, the Senate must assert the authority given to it in the Constitution on matters of war and peace. And we must send Donald Trump a clear message on behalf of the American people: no more endless wars. If any of my colleagues, if any of the American people doubted what Trump was up to, here's what he said last night to the New York Times. They asked him, how long are we going to stay in Venezuela? A month, 6 months, a year? Donald Trump said, quote, I would say much longer. Donald Trump's ready for an endless war in Venezuela and Lord knows where else. The American people are not. The American people want us to focus on the #1 issue they face: the rising costs that they can't afford the things they need, the affordability crisis. And instead, Donald Trump and too many of our Republican colleagues are saying, let us spend our treasure and maybe even American lives on Venezuela and other areas far afield. How can the American people watch this and not just groan and grimace and ache and fear? When we try to do this kind of nation, when America has tried to do this kind of nation building, this kinds of regime replacement in the past, it's led to the American people paying the price in treasure and in blood. So now we have the opportunity to stop. We're very close. We urge our Republican colleagues to join us. Tell the American people you want to focus on what they care about. The cost of groceries, the cost of health care, the cost of electricity and other goods. The contrast between what's happening in the House and the Senate today is glaring. In the House, there will be, from what I am told, a good number of Republicans who will join in saying, extend the tax credits for 3 years. Leader Thune has even refused to put that on the floor. But what's happening here, the ability, the strength, the constitutional authority of the Congress to say no, no endless wars, no sending all our money down to Venezuela and Lord knows what other countries. Again, just look at this, my Republican colleagues. A year longer, I would say not. Here's what Trump said on oversight of Venezuela. He said it could last for years. They asked him a year longer. He says, I would say much longer. How many of you want to see us bogged down in Venezuela for a whole bunch of years? If you don't want to see that, if you want to see us focused on the costs the American people are facing and reduce them, vote with us, vote yes on this very important resolution. I yield the floor.
I recognize the senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I've spoken before, so I'm going to be very brief, and then I'm going to call up the business of the Senate, this war powers resolution. 2 points. In the aftermath of the briefing yesterday, I've had good conversations with colleagues, and many have asked me about the distinction between the execution of a valid arrest warrant and a larger military operation. And I want to state very clearly that I do not challenge, nor does this resolution challenge, the execution of a valid arrest warrant against Nicolas Maduro. That valid arrest warrant, bringing him to justice in the United States, will be good for America and good for Venezuela. And we do not challenge that. And in fact, under the War Powers Resolution, I'm not even sure that the execution of an arrest warrant, even if accompanied by a military escort, would rise to the level of hostilities that would allow such a challenge, and I certainly wouldn't be calling it up for a vote on the floor. But this is obviously bigger than the initiation of an arrest warrant. From the beginning on September 2nd, the striking of Venezuelan boats in open waters, the amassing of naval assets around Venezuela, the president's authorization of covert activities, the seizure of ships, the coordinated attack of the 150 aircraft that not only extracted President Maduro and his wife, but also bombed sites around the countries. This is bigger than an arrest warrant. More than 200 enemies have been killed. U.S. troops have been injured. 2 are still hospitalized. And now we understand, after the hearing yesterday and what's been made public, this will go on for a long period of time. The seizure of oil, the dictation of terms about elections and the politics of Venezuela will go on for years. This is not an attack on the arrest warrant, but it is merely a statement that going forward, U.S. troops should not be used in hostilities in Venezuela without a vote of Congress, as the Constitution requires. The second point I'll make, Mr. President, is this. We're all humans in this place, and one of the things we try to do is minimize votes that we might regret. And it's impossible to eliminate those. We're humans, and we cast thousands of votes, even in a single term in the Senate, and there will be some we might look back on and feel like, oh, maybe we should have done this differently. The most likely vote where regret would be most painful is a vote on matters of war. And I just want to assure my colleagues, here is something I can guarantee you. No one has ever regretted a vote that just says, Mr. President, before you send our sons and daughters to war, come to Congress. That is a vote that no one has ever regretted and no one will ever regret. And with that, Mr. President, pursuant to Section 601B of the International Security Assistance and Arms Control Act of 1976, I move to discharge the Committee on Foreign Relations from further consideration of SJ Res 98, to direct the removal of the United States Armed Forces from hostilities within or against Venezuela that have not been authorized by Congress.
The clerk will report.
Motion to discharge SJ Res 98. Joint resolution to direct the removal of United States Armed Forces from hostilities within or against Venezuela that have not been authorized by Congress.
Questions on the motion to discharge? Is there a sufficient second? Appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks.
No.
Gotcha. Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Mr. Kennedy, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Murky, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Thune. Mr. Tillis. Mr. Tuberville. Mr. Van Hollen. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warnock. Ms. Warren. Mr. Welch. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Baldwin, Bennett, Durbin, Kane, Ossoff, Reed, Schiff, Schumer, Shaheen, and Young. Senators voting in the negative: Barrasso, Capito, Graham, Johnson, Lankford, Marshall, Moran, Marino, Risch, Scott of Florida, Sheehy, Tillis, and Wicker. Ms. Smith, aye. Mr. Curtis, no. Mr. Murphy, aye. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Haggerty, no. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Crapo, no. Mr. Kennedy, no. Mrs. Britt, no. Ms. Lummis, no. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Peters, aye. Mr. Mullen, no.
Ms. Murkowski, aye. Ms. Hassan, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Mr. McCormick, no. Mr. Hoven, no. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Warnock, aye. Mrs. Hyde Smith, no. Mrs. Murray, aye. Mr. Kelly, aye. Mr. Welch, aye. Mr. Heinrich, aye. Mr. Lujan, aye. Mr. Padilla, aye. Mrs. Moody, Mrs. Moody, no. Miss Rosen, aye. Mr. Cassidy, no. Mr. Thune, no. Ms. Hirono, aye. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Cornyn, no. Ms. Duckworth, aye. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, no. Ms. Ernst, no. Mr. Booker, aye. Mr. Markey, aye. Ms. Blunt Rochester, aye. Ms. Warren, aye. Mr. Sanders, aye. Mr. Van Hollen, aye. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Tuberville, no. Mr. Justice, no. Mr. Cotton, no. Mrs. Blackburn, no. Mr. Banks, no. Mr. Husted, no. Ms. Cortez Masto, aye. Mr. Ricketts, no. Mr. Schmidt, no. Mr. McConnell, no. Ms. Slotkin, aye. Mr. Coons, aye. Ms. Alsobrooks, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Gallego, aye. Mr. Sullivan, no. Mr. Kim, aye. Mr. Rounds, no. Mr. Budd, no. Mr. Grassley, no. Mr. Hickenlooper, aye. Mr. King, aye. Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Fetterman, aye. Mr. Schatz, aye. Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Mrs. Fisher, no. Mr. Kramer, no. Mr. Cruz, no. Mr. Paul, aye. Mr. Hawley, aye.
The yeas are 52. The nays are 47. The motion is agreed to. The joint resolution will be placed on the calendar. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session and resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, the judiciary. Alexander C. Van Hook of Louisiana to be United States District Judge for the Western District of Louisiana.